I have been asked this question, if not 100 times, probably 1,000. And that is, young people look at their work and they say, will I ever use this in real life? And I like to answer with an emphatic, yes, you will. Although maybe not in the way that you expect. Everything that we do in school, everything the way it should be done, is to help you to develop the muscles of the mind, what I call. Another metaphor I like to use is tools of the mind. These are mechanisms that God has given to you to help you make choices and decisions in life. And that is what life is all about. Everything that is done is to help strengthen these tools of the mind. It is to help them to mature, to help them to grow, where you can go from making bad decisions to make good decisions. Where you can go from making good decisions to making better decisions. Where you can go from making better decisions to maybe the best decision you can make in this circumstance or in this situation. That's what education is about, and you need to understand that. That's what we are trying to do. Now, the reason I use the metaphor of a muscle is the fact that even though you have all of these mechanisms of the mind, they must be developed. And to develop them, they must be used. To develop them, they must be exercised. And we do that in certain things that we do in school. Another reason I use the metaphor of a tool of the mind is because even though you have the template of these, even though you have each and every one of these tools, you must learn to use them properly. As a carpenter has to learn to use a hammer and a saw, and an electrician has to use certain tools, and as a plumber has to use certain tools, you have to be able to use these properly. And that is what school is about. That is what school should be about. Number one, the first tool that you have is memorization. You have been endowed with the ability to memorize. And yet many people hate to memorize. Why? Because it takes time, energy, and effort. And all of these tools, all of these muscles to develop takes time, energy, and effort. And that is what we try to do at school. Think about when you learn to read. In kindergarten, in first grade, you basically have these symbols that mean nothing to you, but you memorize them, and you memorize them, and you go over it, over and over and over it, and rote memory. Rote is a very good way to memorize things. But you do it until you learn to associate a sound with them. And then you can put together different sounds until you can read. And you do the same thing with numbers until you know what they mean. And all of this is done from memorization. It is the foundational tool, the template, if you will, of almost all memory. And yet many times, by the time we get to junior high school, we don't want to memorize anything. You need to be memorizing something your entire life. Maybe not reading, maybe not even math, but memorizing things that are good. Poetry, scripture. Because you find out that if you get into things, they will get into you. And they become a part of you. And they become a part of you that when you need them, God will give them back to you at the appropriate time. And maybe there's a time in your life when you really need some strength. And He will send back the verses, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. And there are times in your life when you struggle with this. And if you have a reservoir of memorized poems and scripture and things that are good and proper and just, they will come back to you and they will help you at the times that you need them most. Work on that muscle. Learn to use that tool for the rest of your life. The second tool that God gives us is the ability to comprehend. That is the idea of what is going on. What's actually happened here? It is fine if you can read, but do you understand what you have read? Well, how do you work on that in school? Well, that's what you do in history. That's what you do in literature. That's what you do in science. That's what you do at the end of a section when you do a section review. Do you understand what happened here? That is what you do at the end of a chapter with a chapter review. Do you know what happened? Develop your ability, develop your muscle of comprehension, because all of life is about making choices, about making decisions. Do I really know what happened? Do I really know what is happening? The third tool that God has given you is the tool of application. That is the ability to take something that you have already learned. Maybe you have memorized it. Maybe you have comprehended it from somewhere else, and apply that to another situation in your life. Application. Can you apply this? Much of learning is about these things. Can you apply what's going on? How do you learn about that in school? Well, have you ever tried a word problem? Here's some information over here. Can you apply that and put it into a formula? People hate to do that because it is hard, but you must work that muscle. So the next time you do a word problem and you read over it and you think, well, I just can't figure that out. Well, give it another try, and maybe a third try and a fourth try. Because all wisdom comes from application, being able to apply things. Someone said that the difference between good and wise is that a smart person can apply things from his own life. A wise person can apply things from the lives of others. And so, can you apply things that you have learned to situations that are new and that are novel? That is one of the tools that you learn while you are doing word problems, while you are doing problems like sequence, things in proper sequence. There are a lot of things in life that need to be done in proper sequence, and you can do them out of sequence. But when you do, you will find that they will not have the desired results. The next is the tool of analytical thinking, of analysis. Can you analyze what is going on here? You see, comprehension has to do with what is going on. Analysis has to do with why. Why did this happen? Why is this going on in my life? It is the idea of cause and effect. And this is higher level learning, and many people struggle with this. Many people do not know the difference between causation and correlation. And because they confuse correlation with causation, they see things and they make assumptions that are totally wrong. Education should help you to develop the muscle, to develop the tool of analytical thinking. How do you do that? Well, you do it in proofs in geometry. You do it in trigonometry. You do it in algebra. You do it in science, in physics. Analyze this. What is going on here? I teach a psychology class. We try to do a lot of analyzing there. What is going on here? Why is this happening? That is a tool that you need to work on for the rest of your life. The next tool that you need to work on is the tool that God has given us, the idea of morality, of judgment. Not only what happened, and not only why it happened, but should it have happened. That is morality, morals, ethics. And there are certain schools that don't even approach that at all. We approach it in chapel every day. Do you understand there are some things that you should not do? It does not matter the circumstance. It does not matter the situation. That is why I try to teach the idea of an objective morality versus a relative morality. And many people will float through the sea of confusion because they've never really built the foundation, the structure of ethics and morals that will lead them and guide them in the way that they should go. In fact, if you look at many of the ills of our society today, it is because people do not have the structure and do not have the ability to understand the morals and ethics. Is this right? Is this wrong? Should I do this? Maybe I should not do that. Should I go here? Should I not go there? That is a muscle that many people have not developed. We might learn what is going on and why. But are you dealing with the morality of it? The ethics of it? You can look at this through history. And of course, through the Bible. What and what not should you do? There are things that you understand. He says, "Thus saith the Lord, thou shalt not, thou shalt not, thou shalt not." But then other things that are just as hard. Love your neighbor as yourself. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Are you developing that muscle? Are you developing the tool of morality, of ethics, whereby you can make proper and good and righteous decisions and choices in life? And last, but maybe not least, is the ability to create. And a lot of people say, well, I'm not very creative. I'm not artistically inclined. I can't play a musical instrument. I can't draw all of these things. But the good book says that we were created in the image of God. And part of what that means is that God endowed each and every one of us with the ability to create. And many times we do not think about it, but you every day try to help create the world that you live in. Every day, through your attitudes, through your words, through your deeds, you are helping to create a family of more joy or less joy, of more peace or less peace, of more love or less love. You see, you are doing your part to help create or help destroy. And many times it is done through the Word. It is amazing that the good book says that God spoke, "Let there be light," and there was light. In many of the same ways, you can speak your world into existence. Have you ever spoken to your mother or father, "Thank you so much for this," and see the joy that you can create? Some of you may say at one time in your life, "Will you marry me?" And if the answer is in the affirmative, two people start to create their own world. What an incredible idea that is. Whether it has to do with relationships, whether it has to do with family, whether it has to do with jobs, with career. Many times we speak, "I am going to do this. I am headed in this direction. I am walking down this road." And so we speak it. And then it starts to create in our own life. And we create our own life. Whether that is good or whether it is bad. Good or evil. Light or darkness. We have a responsibility to ourselves, to our family, to our country, and to God, to create the best world that we can create. And we are about it every day. True education is about helping you to develop the muscles of the mind, the tools of the mind that will help you to make good, proper, righteous decisions. choices. That's what true education is about. So if you ask me the question, will I ever use this in real life? The answer is an unequivocal yes. 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 Because if you are doing your part, you are learning to use the tools, the mechanisms whereby God has given you to make good decisions. And you will use them every day of your life.